Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress. Only 64 days now till the World Championship match between Carlsen-Caruana in November in London. 64, a magic number for chess players, and only just over 2 months to go. On Chess to Impress we continue the countdown, the build up towards a great match, by looking at all the other 46 World Championship events in the history of the undisputed and official World Championship. Carlsen-Caruana is number 47 and we have arrived at number 15. Alexander Aljochin became the 4th World Champion in 1927 by beating José Raúl Capablanca. Then Aljochin successfully defended his title twice against the same opponent, Efim Bulgoyebov, in 1929 and 1934. And only 1 year after that last match he defended his title again, this time against the Dutchman Max-Euwe. In fact, it was already in 1933 that Aljochin challenged Euwe for a match. Euwe accepted the challenge. And 1 year later Euwe confirmed his status as a proper challenger when at the tournament in Zurich in Switzerland he finished second behind Aljochin. And following the Zurich tournament, Euwe said, "In analyzing the games we came to the conclusion that Aljochin's superiority over other masters was his opening knowledge. If he could not get the initiative or some advantage in the opening, he was willing to enter complications to try and muddy the waters. So I went to Vienna for a few months to study Becker's files on the openings, which were the most complete and up-to-date at that time. Nowadays we download the database or we buy a book online if we want to study openings, but in those days you had to travel to Vienna. The match took place in the Netherlands in 13 different cities, so it was a traveling circus. The match conditions were the best of 30 games with at least 6 wins by the winner, as we had seen in previous matches as well. This is a picture from after the match, Euwe with the winner's wreath on the left and Aljochin on the right. In this video we're going to look at game 26 of this match. Let's get into it. Euwe was white, Aljochin was black. It is the 3rd of December 1935. Before this game Euwe was 13 points to 12 up and needed another 2.5 points out of the last 5 games to get to the 15.5 points that would win him the match. And in this game he opened d4, e6, c4 and f5. Aljochin plays the Dutch defense against a Dutch opponent in a game played in the Netherlands. Very appropriate. g3, bishop b4 check, bishop interposes and the bishop went back to e7. Aljochin repeats this maneuver from the 24th game, 2 games before this game was played. Black is claiming that the bishop on d2 is poorly placed. So black's 2 moves with his bishop is in fact not a loss of tempo. The e4 square is a crucial square in this opening. And now that the bishop is on d2, white's king's knight cannot go there through f3 to d2 to put pressure on the e4 square. Also the white queen is not protecting the pawn on d4, which can be an issue in some variations. Euwe fianchettoed his bishop, knight f6, knight c3 and the world champion castled. Knight f3 and knight e4. Euwe castled, and here bishop f6 was played in the 24th game, and that didn't work out very well for Aljochin, so he tried something else in this game. He played b6. An alternative is d5 going into the stone wall, and this was an option for black as suggested in the match book on this match. But b6 was played and Euwe played queen c2, bishop to b7 and knight e5. Now let's have a look. This knight now is attacked 3 times by these 3 pieces and it's only defended twice. So black has to do something about that. He takes on c3 and this is a well-known exchange sacrifice which white cannot afford to accept. And Euwe knew this, because if you take on b7 then knight takes e2 check is the variation, king g2, knight takes d4 hitting the queen, queen d3, knight b to c6, white takes that knight and now both recaptures are good for black. If you take with the pawn and white takes the exchange, queen takes, and now you cannot touch the knight. If you take the knight there is c5 check and white loses the queen. If after knight takes c6 you take back with the knight instead of with the pawn, that's also good for black. If white now takes the exchange, queen takes, then you cannot touch the pawn on d7 because of knight e5 check. Again a check, and again you're losing your queen. Of course white does not have to give away his queen, but this exchange sacrifice works out well for black in any variation. Euwe knew this, and he did not take on b7, he took on c3. Bishop takes, king takes, and queen c8 from Alekhine. d4, d5, a classic pawn advance in the Dutch game. White now gets a small positional advantage because his bishop is better than black's bishop. That's the main difference in this position. d6. Black is behind the development and cannot allow white to open any central files for his rooks. So black takes d takes e6 and d takes e6 out of the position. That would open the d file for white's rooks. Knight d3 and e5. King h1 and c6. Black has made 3 consecutive pawn moves in the center. Queen b3 and king h8, taking the king out of the firing line of the queen on b3, taking some tactical possibilities out of the position. f4 from Euwe, e4 and knight to b4, threatening d takes c6 and then put the knight on that beautiful square on d5. So c5 is a logical move, and the knight goes back to c2. Knight e7, finally developing that piece. Knight e3, this is white's king's knight that has made a remarkable journey already, but is not finished yet. It already made this journey, but the knight, as we'll see, will make many more moves. Bishop f6 from black, trying to counteract white's bishop, which is a lot better than black's. But Alekhine had not judged the following move sequence correctly. Euwe took on f5, a wonderful piece sacrifice, and the only way to gain an advantage. Why is this a piece sacrifice? Well, we'll see. Bishop takes c3. That's attacking the knight. Discovered attack. The knight takes on d6, hitting the queen. Queen b8, counter-attacking the knight. And knight takes e4. Now black saves his bishop, and if we count, we see that white has 3 pawns for the bishop. Knight d2, making room for the e-pawn to steam up the board. And g5. This is black's best chance. He has to try and launch a kingside attack, for if he doesn't, then the white pawn mass will march down the board and will be unstoppable. The drawback of g5 is that white will now get 3 connected passers, and black's king is more vulnerable without the shield of the g7 pawn. Euwe played e4, g takes f4, g takes f4, and bishop d4. The pawns keep marching, and queen e8 looking for counterplay against white's king. e6 hitting the knight, rook g8, and now you cannot take on d7 because of queen e2, with a mate threat on g2 and winning then that piece back on d2 with a better position for black. So after rook g8, Euwe did not take the knight, he played knight f3. The knight keeps dancing around the board. Queen g6 with a mate threat on g2, and rook g1, another wonderful move from Euwe. And we see the point of knight f3 covering the g1 square once more. White gives up an exchange, but will win the knight on d7. Bishop takes, rook takes, hitting the queen, and here Alekhine should have played the queen to f5. That was the only move, not easy to find, as it leaves this diagonal open for white's queen to come onto with check. But it was the only move to keep the balance. Let's look at one variation. If we now play knight g5 like we see in the game, with a very strong threat of knight f7 check, Then black can play h6 to deal with that threat. And if white takes then on d7, then black can take on g5. And what is very important here is that the black queen is covering the h3 square. So queen f5 was the best move here, but Alekhine understandably plays queen f6, keeping the queen on the long diagonal. Knight g5, again with that threat of knight f7. So black does not have time to save his knights. And h6 here is not good. We'll see the difference because of e takes d7, with a big advantage for white. You cannot take the knight as we saw in the previous variation, because then white wins very easily with queen h3 check. That square is now not covered by black's queen. King g7, rook takes check, king f7, and rook f5 wins black's queen. So back to the game. After knight g5 you cannot play h6 as we just saw. Rook g7 was played by Alekhine. Euwe took the piece, rook takes, queen e3, and rook e7, hitting white's queen. You cannot take on b2 instead, because then queen e6 and a big advantage for white. After rook e7, Euwe played knight e6, another move from that knight. Rook f8 and queen e5. Euwe decides to go into an endgame with good winning chances for white, with his very powerful connected pass pawns after the queen swap. Alekhine took, f takes, and if you now take on e6, d takes, rook f5, rook e1, this is a good rook ending for white. Good winning chances. But after f takes e5, Alekhine played rook f5. Rook e1, protecting the e-pawn. Time trouble was also playing a factor here. This is move 38. 2 more moves needed to be made till move 40, till the time control. Here king g8 was a better move than the move played in the game, which was h6. And Euwe in time trouble found a very strong move. Knight d8. Yes, again that knight is actually the winning move, as now the pawns will become unstoppable. If you take that pawn, that doesn't work because of rook takes, and we have a knight fork. King g7, knight takes e5, and this is an easy win for white. So you cannot take the pawn. Rook f2 was played instead by Alekhine. e6, rook d2, and here the game was adjourned after 40 moves and resumed later. Knight c6 hitting the rook. Rooks drop back, and e7. Alekhine played b5, desperately looking for counterplay, but it's too late. Knight d8 from Euwe, king g7, knight b7, king f6, and rook e6 check, kicking the king back. You cannot go to f7 because of knight d6 check, with a nice fork winning a full rook. King g8 and knight takes e8 is winning for white. So after rook e6 check, the king went to g5. Knight d6 hitting the rook, and the rook took on e7. Alekhine knew there was no way out. Here rook takes e7 wins easily, but Euwe played knight e4 check, and here Alekhine resigned. It's fitting that this knight makes the final move. 19 of white's 47 moves were made with this beautiful piece that's now on in the center of the board. It's another fork, and after king f5, knight takes d2, rook takes e6, d takes e6, king takes, and c takes b5, we can see that this is a very easy win for white with his extra piece. So Euwe won a very crucial game and now made it 14 points to 12, and he only needed 1.5 points more out of the last 4 games. The game was played in Zandvoort in the Netherlands, and this game lives on as the Pearl of Zandvoort. A beautiful game played by Max Euwe, who 4 games later became the 5th official and undisputed world champion. Here we see the results, and we see that Alekhine actually won game 27. So after this horrible defeat that we just saw, he won the next game. But the last 3 games were drawn. In the last game, Euwe agreed to a draw in a winning position because he knew that would give him the world title. 9 wins to 8 and 15.5 points to 14.5. And we had a new champion of the world. The 3rd world champion Jose Raul Capablanca never got a rematch, but Alekhine did. As you can see, there was a rematch 2 years later, and that's what the next video is about. Hope you liked this video on the first Alekhine-Euwe match. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. If you like the series, if you like this video, please share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. The link to the series is in the description box, and also I put it up here. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.